In this video, we're going to move right along with how to use some adjustment layers. So I've created a selection essentially of the background here. The next thing I want to do is convert that background to black and white. So I want to basically get rid of the color there. So if I come down to my layers panel, at the bottom of the layers panel, kind of in the middle, is the icon for creating a new fill or adjustment layer. So if you click on that, you'll bring up the options here for your fill and adjustment layer. Your solid color, gradient, and pattern are your fill options. Brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure, and so on are your adjustment layers. The one that I want you to focus on is just converting this to a black and white adjustment layer. So I'm going to click on that. And essentially what that does, it converts the image to black and white. And for the most part, you do have some other options here. These will tend to give you some different look, but for the most part, I would just go with auto. You're in good shape if you stick with the auto feature. And Photoshop does a really good job of balancing that black and white image. All right, so if I come back down to here to my layers panel, what I want to do is make a copy of this mask and move it onto my black and white adjustment layer. So if you recall, you can make a copy quite easily by just alt clicking and dragging. So I'm going to hold the alt key and I'm going to hover my mouse right on top of the layer mask, and I'm just going to click and drag that mask up to this black and white adjustment layer and release. And it will ask, hey, do you want to replace the layer mask? And yes, I do. Now, if we click on this and we invert that, actually we don't want to invert it just yet. So if we turn the bottom layer on, we can see the color showing through the original photo. Now the nice thing about adjustment layers, they're totally editable and they're non-destructive. That means if I just turn off the visibility, I can hide that adjustment layer. So the next thing I want to do is apply some color to blend into or to fill the area of the selection. Now right now, the color of the original photograph, there's not really a whole lot of contrast. There's kind of like a cream color for the bottom of the cross here, kind of like an off-white, different tones of off-white basically, but I'm not really getting enough contrast, enough color here to create contrast at least. So I'm going to continue by creating a new adjustment layer, and this time I'm just going to go with a solid color. And with the color picker, I could pick different values by clicking on the color picker, and just like in Illustrator, you can click and drag over here to switch the hue to pretty much whatever color you want. Maybe we'll go with a purplish kind of color, and then I'll click OK. Now the problem is right now this fill layer is basically covering my entire canvas. I don't have that fill color applied just to the area of the cross. So I'm going to hover my mouse over the mask again. I'm going to hold the Alt button and I'm going to click and drag and move that mask to my fill layer with this purple. And yes, I want to replace the layer mask. And right now it's turning everything, it's selecting the opposite of what I want. It's only filling the background, but that's not a big deal. If I click on the mask and press Control I, that will invert the selection. And now I'm basically applying color over top of the area of the cross, the part that I want to emphasize. Now, if I look at a couple of things here, the opacity is at 100%. So if I adjust that, I can get some interaction between this fill layer and the color underneath. So it does tend to kind of interact a bit, right? So that's one way of working here, is adjusting the opacity of that fill layer. Another way is to adjust the blend mode. So we have all these different blend modes here, and some of these are very similar to the blend modes in Illustrator. So you might recognize a few of these. So if you just kind of click on the specific adjustment here, or color blend mode, it'll give you different effects. The top Here are some of your darkening. Basically, the multiply is probably the best one out of those. But you can also certainly create an overlay or soft light and so on. If you are on that, all you have to do is press the down arrows and you can cycle through all the different blend modes very quickly to get an idea which one you like the most. And some of them are going to be better than others. I think I'm just going to end up going probably with the multiply. And that's essentially it. Now, if I want to change this color, I can double click on the color portion of this layer, and then I can switch the value. If we move this out of the way, I can play around with different tones, or I can change the color entirely. And certainly, I can adjust we'll click OK. I can still adjust the opacity. What is that going to look like at 100% with multiply? That's going to give me a different look than a very faint, maybe 20 to 30% opacity. Now, so again, the nice thing about adjustment layers, they are completely reversible. I can turn them on and off. I'm not affecting my original image in any way. The background image is still there. I haven't affected any of the pixels. So that's a nice thing about adjustment layers. You can apply them, take a look, and see what they look like with or without the adjustment. Now, if I come back down here to my adjustment layer little button at the bottom, I can even create a gradient over that fill. Let's see, maybe we'll go with something like this. Click OK. And then I want to click on this layer mask, Alt-click and drag, and move a copy of that layer mask to this adjustment layer. And we'll click yes to replace that layer mask. And we can go through the same techniques as we did before. If you notice, I had to click on that layer. I'm ready to adjust this. So we could go to multiply or overlay. It's going to give you quite a dramatically different look, obviously. But if I'm happy with that, it's certainly possible to use a gradient overlay or gradient fill for your adjustment layer. And again, anytime you want to change that, you can just double click on it, and you have a few different options here. You can change the angle. You could change it from a radial gradient, and they have a few different options here. So feel free to play around with that, see if you get the look you're after. And we'll just click OK. So there you have it, a real basic way to add color to a selection of your photo. And if I turn this adjustment layer on, the black and white adjustment layer, I get a nice contrast between this kind of gray background, just black and white, with this brightly colored emphasized portion, which is the cross. So in this example, we have a couple different possibilities here. We could even turn on more than one adjustment layer. You see how that's kind of getting this more of a pinkish kind of color. But if I don't want the orange blending with it, I can turn that off. So even with multiple adjustment layers, it's possible to have them blend together as well. And you'll have to kind of play around to see which look is the best for you. Not every blend mode is going to give you great results. So it's a bit of an aesthetic choice. All right, so that's looking pretty good.